There we go. It's recording. What's your name?
I'm Brentley.
Brentley?
Brentley Davis. Brentley MD is what they know me as.
Brentley, okay.
Yeah.
I'm Steve.
Hey, Steve.
Thanks for talking to me. I appreciate
Absolutely.
it.
It's a beautiful afternoon.
Do you, wondering, do you believe that heaven is a real place?
My relationship with God is between me and God. It cannot be explained nor described. And it's not up for me to define what heaven is. That's beyond me. I mean, I'm just a mortal man.
Okay.
And I'm here as a child of God. So you'd have to ask God for that question to be answered.
Okay, you made an interesting statement. You said a child of God. Now, the Word of God says that we are not by nature children of God. So
Depends on how you're listening. It depends on what you're listening to. There's many statements of what God has said, and interpreting that is up to you as an individual. But for me, in my heart, I don't feel it's something that I could lay claim to as to define it. What God is really beyond me. So any words that I use are inadequate.
Okay. Do you believe the Bible is real, or what's your take on the Old Testament, the New Testament?
Well, it depends on what you're calling the Old Testament, because the Old Testament is actually the Hebrew Bible, which has been reinterpreted by many different faiths. So even if you're talking about the Old Testament, the New Testament, and the Christian faith, there's many different interpretations of that too. So it isn't up to me to tell you or anyone else listening what God is or what definition of God is, because the printed word could never compare to the glory of God as God exists.
Okay, can we be hypothetical for a second?
Sure.
If we were to look at the Ten Commandments, and let's just take a couple, and then we'll kind of work through this hypothetical scenario. Have you ever lied?
Have I ever lied personally?
Yeah.
Of course, I'm human.
Okay. Have you ever stolen anything?
Have I ever taken anything that doesn't belong to me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Have you ever looked at a woman to lust after her?
Well, these are all questions. Okay, you're interpreting of the Ten Commandments. Why don't you speak a commandment specifically?
Have you ever stolen anything?
But that's not what the commandment says. What does the commandment say?
Thou shalt not steal.
Thou shalt not steal. Is that the full definition of it, as it was originally written?
Well, it's translated forward to be that.
Translated from?
Well, I don't speak other languages. I just speak English.
Right, but the English language is not what these statements were originally written in. So the history behind them is very deep. And to say, have I ever stolen anything as a person? Well, I live in a country where we as citizens all collectively share, and this country is made up of a lot of different cultures and faiths. And so if I was going to pick an apple from the tree, am I stealing from God? Because that life force comes directly from God. If you buy that tree and plant it in your yard, are you able to claim that life force is yours? If that apple falls and I pick it up and it's going to be eaten by worms, is that stealing? So if I go into a store, have I ever gone into a store and taken something that doesn't belong to me? No.
Okay, well, let's
my sins and my glories are between me and God, and that's what those ultimate commandments are all about. They're there for you to reflect upon your life and ask yourself sincerely, what are you doing, and how can you help your fellow beings that you're sharing this life with?
Well, let's get back to that hypothetical scenario. That just hypothetically now, because I know you haven't put your faith in the Bible itself.
You don't know that.
Well, I mean, just based on what you're saying. Okay.
No, you're making assumptions based on how I look, the way I answer your questions, that I'm not agreeing in lockstep with you, that you're assuming things about me. What I don't want to do is give you a direct answer that would interfere with my own spiritual relationship with God, and that is what I've made a vow to. Is that if I say to you, I believe in the specific idea of God, and you have a different view, then we have contention between each other's beings, but it has nothing to do with God. That has nothing, like, you can't define God. I can't define God. That is up to God. We are finite beings. God is an infinite being. And the interpretation of God's commandments is something ultimately that's between you and your heart and God, and cannot be spoken openly with a stranger or with probably most people you meet. There may be a handful of people you can really discuss that with.
Let me just ask you this. Jesus said to the disciples, he said, "Who do the people say I am?" And they had different answers for him.
Yeah, very different answers.
Yeah, and then he got very personal. I keep adjusting because my knees hurt. But then he got very personal, and he said, "How about you? Who do you say I am?" So, if it's okay with you, I'd like to ask you that question. Who do you say Jesus is?
But that's a question I answer to Jesus. When Jesus asks me that in my prayer, I answer Jesus. But if I was to answer you, I would be false to Jesus. I would be false to the glory of God. If I was to answer that question with you while we were in spiritual practice together, it would be a reflection of my own interpretation of Jesus. Who I believe Jesus is defining Jesus, I think, would be a greater insult to the greater force that Jesus is. If I was to say that I understood Jesus, I would be lying, and that would go against the commandments of God. If I was to say to Jesus, "You are this," and place an image on Jesus that has nothing to do with the truth, which is beyond me, I would be committing a sin. And so I believe that it's more important that we all distill our faith down to the simplest terms so that we don't get lost in a labyrinth of a confusion that keeps us from God.
All right, well, I appreciate you talking to me.
Thank you.